in a constant state of fear and misery. No, we don't miss me anymore. And live in a constant state of fear and misery. No, we don't live in a constant state of fear and misery. No, we don't miss me anymore.
Hello, everybody. So today is Wednesday, June 12th, and we are bringing you the season finale of Block Digest Season 6 at block height 580,412. So what is up today, Rick?
Oh, nothing, man. Yeah, just getting episode 180. It's hard to believe we're all the way up here. It does kind of feel like the last day of school or something, like summer's about to start. Just a 2-week summer, but, well, it's a long summer, but 2-week break. But yeah, it's feeling kind of exciting. Just a little bit of a slow news day, but that's all right. I think we got some good discussions today. That's the problem with spring, summertime, and the closer to the sun area, you feel that blast. How about you, Nopar? Is the heat treating you well, spring, summer, or how are you feeling today?
Yeah, I just landed in Berlin, and 5 minutes ago it was sunny and everything. I wanted to walk to my hotel, but then it started to rain like crazy and thunders and everything, and like, what the heck is happening? Anyway, yeah, so every kind of weather.
That's that sporadic spring for you. It's dynamic weather.
Yeah. Can
All right.
you RBF the weather?
Yeah, RBF the weather. Yeah, let's see if we can pay him off with some cloud seeding. So Shinobi, how's this spring treating you?
It's all right. You know, I didn't get to retire to my beach shack like I wanted, but a couple days I'm going to be fucking going out of state for a week-long camping trip, so that will be pretty nice. Shut down and unplug.
Heck yeah, man. Start the summer season right.
Mhm.
All right. So let's end this season a little bit. So what is going on today with the news? We got a little something we could barely hold our tongues back on the special edition from talking about. So what is up?
Alrighty. Well, first off, is a little bit more information, although still not fully disclosed for obvious reasons, on the Trezor hardware vulnerability that was first announced during the MIT Bitcoin Expo. And, you know, this also affects pretty much all of the Trezor clones and anything using the MCU chipset that Trezor uses. But, you know, I kind of want to go into this because there is a lot of people really just jumping to blindly defend Trezor and all of their clones against this when it was first announced. And even though there wasn't really any concrete details announced, obviously because the nature of this exploit is rooted in the hardware itself and is therefore unpatchable, Ledger is kind of trying to delay the inevitable of this being figured out by any other party involved out there or any kind of malicious entity. But really, the long and short of it is, in about 5 minutes after opening the case of a Trezor or other clone hardware wallet, it is possible to brute force the pin and fully extract the mnemonic seed. And all this takes is about $100 worth of hardware. And so really, I kind of want to just go through a lot of the logic in defense of Trezor and really just dismantle it here at this point. So obviously the first thing I've seen people say is that, well, you have to open the case. And so it's obvious that the device has been tampered with. But the reality of the situation is that you have the seed at that point, and it takes literally 5 minutes to extract it. And with that seed, you can simply load it onto another Trezor and replace the one that you've tampered with. And unless there is some kind of completely unnoticeable mark or identifying feature that uniquely makes your device stand out from a replacement, you will be absolutely none the wiser that your seed has just been compromised. Now, again, this kind of boils down to it's a compromise of the hardware. Like, this cannot be patched. This cannot be fixed. And that's just all there is to it, as long as Trezor and these other companies like KeepKey continue using the same hardware. Now, another thing commonly said in defense of this is that this is outside the scope of the threat model, that the only purpose of the hardware device is to prevent remote exploits. And just frankly, that's kind of horseshit. Because if your only concern is simply preventing remote exploits, you can get a $5 Raspberry Pi without a Wi-Fi chip and just set up Electrum on an air-gapped device like that. It literally costs $5, a fraction of the cost of a Trezor. And if you don't care about your device being compromised by a physical attack, then just go buy the $5 Raspberry Pi and run Electrum on it. It has the exact same security profile. It's not remotely exploitable. You keep it air-gapped and move data back and forth, and you're safe from remote exploits. Like, the reality is that any hardware device out there, the real threat to it, the real threat model that should be constructed is for physical attacks. Now, the last part here is that a passphrase magically fixes this. And this is just so wrong. I don't even know where to start. I mean, the entire logic of a passphrase is something that you remember to extend your mnemonic seed into a new set of keys. Something you can memorize. There is literally decades of in-depth research into user password selection, limitations of people's ability to memorize things, mistakes they make, such as choosing words or passphrases that are personally connected to them, things that all together boil down to exponentially reducing the search space of a passphrase or a password that somebody selects to secure something. And the simple reality is that 99% of people out there are not going to be able to generate a secure passphrase. They're not going to be able to actually memorize something that has enough entropy to secure their wallet if that main mnemonic seed is compromised. And that's just the cold, hard reality. And the whole purpose of hardware devices like this is to give security to these normal people who cannot actually take these steps themselves, who can't actually manage their own security without this device whose sole purpose is to do it for them. Now, as far as just using a Trezor for your pocket change or spending money, yeah, somebody's probably not going to go through all the steps necessary to actually target you, physically compromise wherever you're storing it, and go through this process. But for any kind of sizable amount of money, they will. And the reality is that anybody in this space right now who has Bitcoin and holds on to them for the next 10 years is going to be a high value target. And this model of hardware device with this chip that can be compromised in this way for $100 is absolutely not a secure way to store your money. It's just not. Because as I went over when I first started this, it takes 5 minutes to exploit. It might take another 5 minutes to take that seed and load it onto a new Trezor or a new keep key and replace where it was taken from. And then you have absolutely no idea you have been compromised. And the malicious actor can just go off and lackadaisically take their time in brute forcing your passphrase, which in 99% of people's case is absolutely not secure enough to over time protect from being brute forced. That's just the cold hard reality. And so when it comes to actually securing your keys with a device like this, you have to think long term. You have to think 10 years from now, what are my Bitcoin going to be worth? 10 years from now, what kind of motivation is there going to be to target me and attempt to steal my Bitcoin? Because unless you think that Bitcoin is going to implode in the next 10 years, you are just deluding yourself and being irresponsible and not thinking like that. And this cannot be fixed. This cannot be patched. This cannot be dealt with except by designing a new device with different hardware and security architecture. This is here to stay. And it is just a matter of time before somebody else out there with malicious intentions figures out how to actually take advantage of this exploit. And the hardware to do so is, by Ledger's own admission, simply $100. So when your Bitcoin is worth exponentially more than it is right now, you have to ask yourself, are you okay with storing that money on something that in 10 minutes can be compromised and leave you absolutely none the wiser? I am absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean, this is a lot more different than, I mean, one of our early episodes was like Mission Impossible trying to break into these hardware wallet, this Trezor hardware wallet. This is a lot different story. Janine, I know you got some stuff to say.
Yeah, I mean, I've some of this we've already discussed, but first of all, I think Ledger's claim, and I believe what he actually said in the presentation was that it was 2 to 3 minutes. But I think that it's very irresponsible of them to frame it in that way without actually clarifying that they're making several assumptions within that time frame that they give. First of all, they said the 2 to 3 minutes, that's only measuring the time that it takes for a person who already has built the exploit tool necessary to attack the Trezor device, and 2, has enough knowledge about using that exploit device and, you know, whatever results it comes up with. They would have to have knowledge of both of those. So those are 2 assumptions that they completely ignored or did not factor in. Like the average person, if the average person wanted to build this tool, they would have to spend a lot of time researching how to build it. Now, of course, you know, if the details of how this exploit is actually carried out become public, it's perfectly possible that someone will build an easy to use tool that, you know, you just plug and play or whatever, and there's not as much complexity involved. That's possible. But Ledger is not stating any of those assumptions, and I think that's really irresponsible, because it's by saying that it only takes 2 to 3 minutes to exploit, it's not factoring in that the average person will not be able to do this. And that doesn't factor in the time it takes to set up the exploit tool and all of that. So that's not fair, in my opinion. Second, to address the point you made about, you know, you can just replace a Trezor with a Raspberry Pi. From the physical attack vector perspective, that might be true. That's probably true. I mean, the Raspberry Pi also is not actually designed, unless you're buying the specific model of the Raspberry Pi that like doesn't come with the Wi-Fi card and all of this. Those are not just out of the box air gap. Not all of them are air gap devices. So you would still have to make modifications to it to make it comparable to the Trezor or all Trezors, which do not come with that kind of thing in it. And From a remote attack perspective, which I will read again, I will quote from Trezor's statement that they made at the after the MIT Bitcoin Expo when this whole thing came out. It's not a new thing that's being discussed. They specifically say, we designed the Trezor devices with the above explained threat model in mind. Our main focus is to protect users against remote attacks. This being said, in combination with strong passphrases and at least the basic operational security principles, even the physical attacks presented by Ledger cannot affect Trezor users. And we'll get to the passphrase in a second. But just to make clear, Trezor has publicly stated for a long time now, they are protecting against remote attacks. And so to say that you can just replace that model with a Pi and, you said transfer data back and forth, but how do they do that? With a Trezor, you are able to actually plug it into something like your desktop or laptop. And the device is designed so that the private key is not supposed to be extractable into your computer, even if your computer is compromised. The Raspberry Pi, unless you modify it, like I said, does not have that protection against remote attacks like the Trezor is designed for. So there is a clear difference there. And to get to the passphrase question, again, they say strong passphrase, and they have guides on their website that I haven't looked at in a while, but they recommend, using a certain number of characters. So they're being clear about, like, even if, yes, most people are terrible at creating passphrases, but they've always been explicit about, the number of characters you should reasonably expect to use when you're creating it can give you this certain expectation of security. And I think even Ledger in their presentation said, if you have a passphrase of the X many characters, then you're fine. Now, if people have a problem with creating long passphrases, then the solution, which most people already implement, is to write it down. Like, of course, there are some people who think passphrases should just be memorized, but the other option is to always write it down if your memory is not, it's not a good idea anyway to write it down when it's that long, because then the biggest risk for you isn't the passphrase being stolen. The risk is you forgetting it and data loss, which is the actually biggest reason why people lose their Bitcoin or access to it, because they lose the seed, they lose the passphrase, whatever. That is the biggest attack vector for most people, is simply forgetting things. So at the end of the day,
I can also back this statement back, actually, because that's the single one thing that we are experiencing with Wasabi, that they are losing their passwords,
Yeah, and I think the biggest problem is that, like, yes, some people are able to memorize super long phrases for everything, but the problem is, like for example, I have seen people who have tried to enter their passphrases, while drunk, and of course, hopefully not everyone is actually doing that, but that kind of situation makes you realize that your memory is a big crutch. If that goes away, you're screwed. So the recommended advice usually is to, like your mnemonic seed, write down your passphrase. And if you are in a situation where you feel like your physical security could be easily compromised, then you should probably store those in two separate places. So all of that can be addressed in terms of people being terrible at creating passphrases, remembering long passphrases, but the recommended advice is to use a long passphrase, and that will mitigate this attack. And yes, I fully agree that, like, these are, a lot of these devices, we're only a few years into building hardware wallets. Like, they should massively change and improve their design over time. But I just hope that while we're going along that road, we don't have to, unnecessarily make people afraid of a threat that, by their own admission, by users, affects a very small percentage of people. Obviously, if you are in the small percentage of people who have a bigger risk of physical attacks than data loss in terms of your risk model, then you should probably, adopt different methods. But for the majority of people, it's really not that complicated.
Anybody who has Bitcoin is at risk of a physical attack in this way. And I mean, to kind of wind back and go through all of this systematically, it costs $15 to get a camera for a Raspberry Pi, and all of your information can be transferred back and forth with QR codes. That is completely secure in terms of risk of attack vectors.
Yes,
And
but
then
how
as
many
far as
how many
passphrase-
people know how to set that up? There's like most people we're talking about that get Trezors. Some of the stuff with Trezor is even hard for them to figure out, and they don't understand why they have to do it. Like the idea that
there
these
are
people
video
would go and set up
tutorials for anything, but overall, like the core point is the passphrases. Like it's completely irresponsible for Trezor to just go use a passphrase and wash their hand and leave people with this idea that that's secure. 99% of people cannot generate a secure passphrase. And Ledger's recommendation during this presentation was a 256-bit completely random string of characters. That is the exact same amount of entropy as a mnemonic seed itself in order to actually be secure against this. And every digit you drop off of that is an exponential reduction in the security of that passphrase. And as far as writing down a passphrase, it's going to be right near the device because you can't actually use the device if you're using a passphrase without that passphrase. So you are not only leaving the device, which is physically exploitable, but you would have your passphrase literally right next to it. So I don't even have to spend time or effort trying to brute force it at that point. I'm just going to take down the written copy of it. Like this, and this is just ultimately like this is completely irresponsible to treat physical attacks like they don't matter, because every single person who owns Bitcoin and is known to own Bitcoin is at risk of that attack. That is not something that only a tiny minority of people are vulnerable to. That is a risk that every single Bitcoiner in the world is exposed to.
Okay, but Shinobi, we're not talking about the possibility of a person facing that risk. We're talking about the probability. And, yes, of course, if you get a stupid Bitcoiner who uses their name, everyone in their neighborhood knows where they live, and the fact that they have Bitcoin, that significantly increases the chances of them getting compromised in that way. But for the majority of people, as long as you're smart and you're not, telling everyone and their mother that you own Bitcoin, that's not a significant risk to you.
It is a very significant risk. And the vast majority of people do not act like us. They do not hide the fact that they have Bitcoin. They are not privacy conscious. They are normal people. And they will regularly talk about the things they're involved with in their life. And I'll tell you a story about my father when he was a kid. Had a comic book collection that would right now be worth millions and millions of dollars. And it was stolen out of his parents' garage because his little brother told a neighborhood kid about it. And that kid told somebody else about it. And a bunch of older kids heard through the grapevine that this huge comic book collection that at the time was worth tens of thousands of dollars, and they broke into the garage and stole it because people talk about things, and that ripples around through social circles.
Okay, but you realize that anecdotes don't compare to the countless studies that have been done. Like Trezor themselves mentioned the Binance study where users self-report, and like usually users, they don't have an accurate conception of like what their biggest threat is. But in this case, like it's true, most people are going to lose their Bitcoin keys because they forget them or forget where they store them, or they, those are the biggest risks for this is something we agreed on before, and I don't think it's fair to change our understanding of this.
We're not arguing
because
about bigger risk. We're arguing about something being a risk. At no time did I make any comparison of whether your risk of losing something or having it stolen is higher. I'm simply pointing out that the risk of things being stolen is very high. And the more Bitcoin is worth, which was the core of my point when I started covering this, gets worth, the more that risk is going to increase. And every single person who has Bitcoin right now is going to be exposed to an enormous risk in this regard over the next 10 years with a huge financial incentive to target them.
Just one thing I wanna, actually two things I want to drop in. One is that I'm very against the passphrases in the hardware wallets because of what Janine said, that it's not just we know right now that the single biggest reason people lose access to their bitcoins is losing their passwords. These are normal people, and okay, but passphrases makes it much worse, because what you cannot do with these passphrases is actually, like, you cannot test it against things, right? So you cannot test it against the hardware wallet. So this makes it even worse. But this brings me to the other thing, that you have to think about this passphrase as, you can't just say, wow, this has this entropy, because that's not how you brute force it out. How you brute force it out, okay, now you have the mnemonic words, great, but you have to get the passphrase. But the only way you can brute force out the passphrase is actually to query the Bitcoin blockchain for the first address, and you have to check which path it is derived to, right? So it's just much harder than just simply, like, you would classify brute forcing the entropy. So yeah, my point is that I'm very against passphrases in this form, but actually passphrases provide more security than it would appear initially.
Well, there's
I mean,
two things with two things with that, Nopar. Is one, like, you're kind of spelling out a big problem here. Mitigating one of these things, the risk of losing something, now exponentially increases your exposure to something else, having your money stolen. And two, there are shit tons of ways to speed up that brute forcing. I mean, there are literally services in this space right now that will brute force things like that with GPU farms. And again, most people's passphrases are not that complex. It is not the entire search space in terms of bits that you have to go through to realistically crack a passphrase your average person is going to create.
And
So-
another thing we haven't brought up is, like, another strategy. If you're worried about, because, like, we can all agree that none of these hardware wallets are particularly good at doing tamper evidence, right? Like, not in the packaging, not in the device itself. None of them are particularly good at doing that. They're not designed for that. It's, like, very obvious to anyone who understands hardware security.
But that's in this specific case irrelevant, because I would compromise your device and not care that it's showing evidence of that, and then simply replace it and load your seed on a new one. So
Sure,
that
but
wouldn't in any way
I
help.
wouldn't say it's irrelevant, because, like, it just, what your company is spending time on. You're paying your employee to hack your competitor, like, like, what the fuck? If you're paying your employee to hack a code card, then I'm pretty sure that they are going to do the presentations if code card gets any close to Ledger. You know what I mean? It just, I don't think Trezor is actually going through Ledger and trying to hack them.
Well, the point I was trying to make is that if you're really concerned about the tamper evidence of the device itself, the solution is to not have your seed instantiated on the device if you're not using it. I mean, so the point of the main thrust of this attack is that if your seed is instantiated on the device, then someone comes along, manages to open it, and can compromise it with an exploit tool. Well, the very, very simple solution to that is to only use the device, only have the seed instantiated on it when you use it. I mean, technically, you're always recommended you have your seed, your mnemonic seed, with you when you're using the device, in the event that, the device malfunctions and you have to do a recovery. So it makes sense to not have the seed instantiate on the device unless you're using it, and then after you're done using it, then you wipe it, and then there is no issue. So
But
that's
but
another
then
easy solution.
you are drastically reducing your security even more because you're guaranteeing your seed is just going to be sitting there around, and I won't even have to go through this exploit. I'll just take your seed.
But that gets to a whole, I mean, that the issue of whether your seed is protected or not is going to be a factor in both cases. So we haven't, it doesn't change the problem. It makes it slightly better if you don't have it on the device, because at least with your seed, you know, I mean, you can do tamper evidence with that. You can put it in a tamper evident bag. You can
But
also do that with the
doesn't
Trezor
help.
device.
That doesn't help at all, because by the time you see anything, it's gone, your money is swept, and you have nothing. And that's like the whole core of the point, which is really why I have a problem with this and how people are responding to this. These things are not isolated systems. Like, these are all interconnected things that all link together into an overall area or attack surface that you have to protect. This is a completely all-encompassing threat model that should be taken into account by these companies, and it's not. They only take one aspect into consideration and don't consider the other, and try to use PR spin to downplay that, when overall this is all a single space of risk. It's not isolated into neat compartments, and people need to stop trying to act like it is. That's like the core issue here. It's not a single device. It's overall key management and keeping that secure. And people keep trying to dissect it and chop it up into little compartments, and that's just not reflective of reality.
It's also not reflective of reality that this exploit is going to be a major problem for the majority of people.
It absolutely will in the next 10 years, because every single person who has a Trezor right now, who has Bitcoin on it right now, it is not going to be pocket change. It is not going to be just a couple $1,000s. It's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars. And that will absolutely turn every single person holding Bitcoin right now into a potential target, with a very high financial incentive to target them.
Yeah, I just wanted to say also, like, I know that it's some assumptions there and it's a lot of circumstance, but yeah, like you're saying, I mean, as the value goes up and, you know, people become bigger targets, not just that, it's like this, exploit becomes more in demand, to where you'll see people, you know, actually a market derived for it, to where people are trying to find that exploit, because there is this small pool of targets that it will be. You'd have to think of it like bank robberies or something, where it's well planned out, and this is a different time whenever, you know, these things have large amounts of value, and it's honeypots that people will, you know, debate on how the best to do it. And I could see it being a bigger problem down the line, but like you're saying, I mean, like, it's all kind of circumstantial, and if you're smart about it, and, you know, it's not a lot of Bitcoin or not a lot of value right now, then you probably don't have much to worry about. At the same time, we're seeing new multi-sig, you know, developments for custody, and as well, you know, more hardware wallets coming down the line. I mean, if you do have that large amount of value, then you should be moving up with those developments as they go on. So I understand it's like, this is, if people just behave like this is all, you're good to go, and you just, you know, hand this over to your kids in 20 years and everything will be fine. It's not, it's complicated. You have to stay with the developments, and you have to still be smart about the way that you're using these devices.
Let's close this topic with the last question of mine. Why does Trezor have the mnemonic words on the device? Like, that's not the standard way of how we are doing Bitcoin wallets. We create the mnemonic words, and the user writes it down, and then we throw them away. And then the user will be able to decrypt the encrypted secrets with the pin code, for example, or with the password, or that's the standard, to throw away the mnemonic words. So I don't understand, why does it have there? Is there a reason?
Well, I mean, I obviously can't speak for the Trezor team, but I would imagine, just because from a security standpoint, it's not really much different to have the words versus the master key on a device, except maybe a little bit of extra friction in trying to import it into something.
Yeah. So this is a big problem. There's entire companies sprung up that are trying to solve custody, and Trezor and Ledger and Cold Card, for sure, Open Dimes. These things are the best solutions that we found so far. But Bitcoin doesn't stay in one place. This thing keeps moving forward.
Alrighty then, I guess. Should we move along?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm good. Janine, do you have anything else to add on this one?
No.
Alrighty then, I guess next up is I think some nice news. Samurai wallets, Dojo Stack, and Whirlpool are going to be integrated with the Nodl. So as soon as this integration is done and starts shipping, Nodls will come with default installation of Whirlpool to make use of Samurai's CoinJoin liquidity pool, as well as Dojo, so that you can seamlessly link your Samurai wallet on your phone to your own full node instead of leaking your address information to Samurai's server. And so I think like this is a pretty good thing. And, Nodal as a company has been really on top of integrating pretty much all of the software being developed in terms of wallets and different layers of utilities that a user could possibly make use of. And I mean, this is exactly the kind of shit that a product like this should be doing. I mean, obviously, I'm gonna hope that most of the people watching the show don't actually need a product like this and are capable of handling all this software themselves. But there is a lot of people out there who can't, and kind of asking them to manage and set this all up is a little bit of a tall order for them. So it's really nice to see them continuing to roll all of this stuff into a simple plug and play package that your normal person can actually take advantage of. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Nodal actually has Wasabi integrated as well, don't they, Nopara?
I mean, Wasabi can work with any full node. It doesn't even have to be Bitcoin Core, but I wouldn't recommend it using it that way unless you are using it over Tor, unless you are exposing a Tor endpoint with Nodl and not your real IP, because the Bitcoin peer-to-peer messages are, oh, I'm going into the, yeah, sure, you're right, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is pretty awesome, and I hope that other companies who are building node products out there really take note. Like, there is a lot more than just Bitcoin Core in terms of software that users should have plug and play access to. We are quickly over this last year seeing a whole software stack start to develop. So, there's more to do than actually just drop Bitcoin Core on something and hand it to a user. So props to Nodal.
Yeah, that's where it's getting more complicated. I mean, they dropped Wasabi in there with their software stack that you can load onto that Nodal. And, I'll admit, it's like my node fell out of sync and I've been debating on building a new one or just ordering one of these. And like you're saying, I mean, that software stack is building up. And, if you got smart guys like Keto Miner over there with Nodal and, T-Dev over there, I mean, there's a lot of people that are working with this group that, I would feel confident of myself. I would feel confident with their build. I would try and support them and build that out. Like I was even looking at a Nodal not too long ago, and yeah, this will just get me looking there. And yeah, it's good to see Samurai moving forward with open sourcing the dojo. And I know a lot of us have been thinking about when's that node coming out for being able to link to the Samurai app and wallet, and it just yeah. So now we got the open source dojo, and now they've connected with Nodal, and so we'll probably be getting that later sometime this year. hopefully. I mean, there's no announcement of that. I'm just crossing my fingers on that one.
All right. So, any more comments on this one?
Yo, Janine, you want to take this into something about somebody coming back?
Well, she's not exactly coming back. She's just still kind of around, which is annoying. But many of you, if you've been following since last summer, you may have remembered that I was quite perturbed by the fact that a woman named Susanne Tempelhof was scheduled to speak at the Decentralized 2018 conference. And I was not so much perturbed or upset that she was speaking at a conference because she's done that many times, but this was one of the first times where the bio that the conference website provided for her was particularly whitewashed in terms of her actual past, which I've talked about this a number of times. You can find a video. I can't remember which episode that was when we last talked. Episode 122 was when I last talked about this. But in summary, if you haven't seen it, basically she worked for the US State Department somewhere around, I think, 2005-ish, 2004 until sometime in 2012 for the US State Department to conduct PSYOPs, mainly in Afghanistan and Libya, as part of regime change operations. What's particularly interesting is that she was actually recruited while she was at art school because, as we know, every art student has an absolutely amazing understanding of things like governance and, you know, how to run society and what a healthy society looks like. So she's a perfect candidate for, you know, this. And so her bio refers to the psychological operations that she conducted for the US government, which ended up leaving giant craters across multiple countries. She refers to this as pioneering research on governance, when in reality, she was just one of the many cogs in the military-industrial complex that destroyed a bunch of human lives and will continue to affect many generations after this. And she was making enough money from that work that she could afford a very expensive condo in Washington, D.C., which she even continued to pay for after she was technically banned from the US because she overstayed her visa one day and wrote a very angry letter to the US government saying, "How dare you do this to me after all the work that I've done for you?" And so I noticed, because, you know, I at one point thought I would be in Berlin at the time, that I would check out the Unchained conference, which is happening 2 days from now. And I noticed on their speaker roster that Susanne Tempelhof was under the Real World and Enterprise Solutions list, which is, by the way, a very funny list because the first speaker under that section, his talk is about there is no blockchain. And then by the time you get to the bottom of the list, which is where Susanna is, her talk is about building nations on blockchains. So very interesting transition, as someone pointed out, below my thread. But yeah, so I basically just kind of did the same thing as I did last summer, which was point out, hey, this person is speaking at this conference. You might want to know this about her past and the fact that she hasn't ever atoned for it in any way. And she just keeps getting away with this. And so there's not really that much new information. The one thing I did ended up receiving, people were tweeting at me letters. For example, there was a letter from like 4 members of BitNation, I think actually before it launched, who basically wrote a letter in Bitcoin Magazine saying, you know, we quit. And none of the reasons were about her past as like contributing to, you know, war crimes. It was about things like how she ran the project terribly and how she decided at one point she wanted to be the leader of a leaderless movement and all of these, you know, management faux pas. So yeah, she has a lot of problems. That's very clear. But yeah, I mean, the reason I decided to make this thread is because usually I send messages privately to these conferences saying, hey, I noticed this thing. You know, I basically asked Unchained, why are you, like, do you care about the fact that she was involved in all of this stuff? Do you think this is an accurate portrayal of a person that we want to have speaking at a Bitcoin cryptocurrency event? And their response was, we are a platform for controversial view, a neutral platform for controversial views, which I find very disgusting, because getting people killed, and like, she literally, in her resume for her TED talk that she gave several years ago, she had in her resume overthrowing governments, obviously on behalf of another state, not in an anarchist type way. Yeah, if you have that in your resume, that's not a controversial view. That's not a viewpoint. A viewpoint is, you know, I don't know, voting for a particular president, or I have this opinion about, you know, the tax system or something. Like, a viewpoint is you expressing something, not necessarily there being any actions behind that. This is completely different. This is actual actions where she profited off of the suffering of others and made a project that makes no sense. I'm surprised that it's still around and these people are still invited to speak at conferences. But yeah, BitNation still exists as a marketing project. And until it stops, I don't know when that will be, but it certainly won't stop if conferences keep inviting people like her. By the way, the conference that I talked about last summer, Decentralized 2018, they never, you know, removed her from the speaker roster, and I wasn't really expecting them to, based on the other kinds of speakers they had there. But I did notice that she never appeared in any of their conference footage, which didn't surprise me, because apparently she has a habit of either smoking on stage to the point where she's not allowed on stage, or she gets so drunk the night before that she doesn't even show up. So, you know, all guesses for why she didn't show up to that event, and maybe she won't show up to Unchained either. But I just, you know, in the event that she is, if anyone's attending this conference, you should be aware of the person who's on stage, the person who's, you know, been invited to speak to you, and maybe you should speak up for people who never will get the chance to speak on stage because of her actions.
Is there anything you would like to ask her?
Yeah, can I hit that?
Oh my God, dude. No, seriously. We might get a question in. What would you ask her?
I've thought about this several times because I wasn't sure if I was going to end up going or not. But if anyone is there, I would suggest that the question you ask is, what have you done to atone for all of the things that you did? You know, do you feel like BitNation is the answer to the fact that you deliberately and for money destroyed a bunch of societies? And, you know, what have you done to fix that? Because so far I see nothing, absolutely nothing. All I see is whitewashing. I see like justifying destroying lives in the name of research. Like, are you kidding me? What kind of research could an art student, 22-year-old art student, what kind of research could justify participating in the destruction of so many countries? Like, what justifies that?
So,
and if the result of your research, Susanna, is BitNation, I have some news for you. It was absolutely not justified in any format, and you should be ashamed.
So yeah, like, just asking, is the cost of life for this research justified? Maybe that would, because, you know, she would be like, what do you mean atone? Like, I mean, I'm just thinking this is overthrow the governments, right? I mean, there's a lot of this where we have debates now about free speech here in the United States. And there's a good portion of the people that, you know, they're arguing from this perspective of like, yeah, I don't believe in free speech. And I mean, like, she's probably on the other side of the spectrum. And that's where it's like, yeah, the adversarial nature of that, it's like, why are we, you know, allowing you this platform to try and talk about this as like something that's favorable and something that we should be in support of? Yeah, it's a good question. Maybe we can get somebody to ask that.
Yeah, maybe someone who will remember, because it was quite long. Anyway,
I can write it down for you.
Yeah, tweet that over to him.
No, I think I just gonna avoid her. It's I'm not good at conflicts, right? When I was living in Taiwan, I order chicken and I got some beef, then I guess I just eat beef then, or whatever they bring, because I'm not that I'm not doing conflicts anyway. So I'm going to speak on this conference too. That's why I'm in Berlin right now. I just arrived, and actually I'm very very excited about this speak, because I was able to simple down very very hard concepts and in a very coherent way, and if anyone from the digest just come, I think it's gonna be great, or watch it later, although maybe not from the digest, because you guys know everything what I'm gonna talk about, but yeah. But come to me and let's talk. All right, what's next?
Oh man, yeah, I'm up next, but I'll just like add to that.
Zuckbucks!
Oh yeah, Zuckbucks is up next. But yeah, the conferences they're getting kind of crazy. I mean, they've been getting crazy for a while, but it's still a fun place to meet up with a few individuals that come around, because there is a few of us. So yeah, if you're around the area, check it out. But yeah, let's go into Zuckbucks. All right, guys. We haven't really talked about this project yet on the show, but I saw a lot of retweets and likes on Caitlin Long's perspective with the topic, so I thought this might be a good time to bring it up. I'm talking about Facebook's official blockchain project called GlobalCoin, or Project Libra, or Libre Network. It's got a few unofficial names and a few unofficial details, like it's supposed to be a stable coin, it'll have a foundation, and it'll cost $10 million to run a node. But we should know a lot more solid facts about the project on June 18th, when it said they'll be releasing the white paper for the cryptocurrency. Now, if you ask me, I think Caitlin's take is a little too rose-colored glasses, but let's hear her out. This is from her tweet thread. Quote, "First prediction, Facebook's stablecoin will be a positive force in developing countries. Second, Facebook will pay interest to users of its cryptocurrency, which will eventually lead to populist calls to repeal subsidies at the heart of the US banking system." Close quote. All right, so her first prediction will probably be correct for a time being, but Facebook's initiatives to drive political change to other countries makes me think they'll be the most tyrannical dictator. To her second prediction, I don't know if people will quickly understand the problems with the US banking system just because Facebook and their blockchain is suddenly making money hand over fist. She even admits this much in her next tweet, quote, "It's true that stablecoin issuers generally pocket the float of the assets backing the coins, but I go out on a limb and predict there's no way Facebook will be able to pocket these big profits without sharing them with their users. To be clear, I haven't seen Facebook disclose this," close quote. Okay, so her tweet sounds like it contradicts this next one. Quote, "The Facebook Foundation will garner big power in capital markets. I discussed the report that Facebook is charging $10 million to node operators, which at first struck me as backwards, but there's a big pot of interest income for its partners to share if it doesn't pay it to users," close quote. So it's going to pay its users interest or just node operators. I think she's trying to speculate a little too far without reading all the details of this project. But I don't know, maybe she's got some insider info about the project, because, that wouldn't be too surprising based on her work. But she goes on to say the idea of an independent foundation is a big positive for the project because they will face all kinds of regulatory uncertainty, which I'll say the idea of a foundation just sounds like they are legally structuring the project to mirror projects the SEC and CFTC have determined to be sufficiently decentralized. You guys know what I'm talking about. All right, her next tweet says, quote, "Facebook's regulatory reporting program will open new discussions. Not only will we see how many of Facebook's 2.3 billion users are real, cryptocurrency users must pass identity verification, but discussions about Facebook's privacy and power are about to extend to money," close quote. Which I'll say, even with the addition of identity verification, we could still see metrics game to their favor. And for the discussions about privacy and power with Facebook extending to money, That's a national discussion we should have seen after the 2008 financial crisis. I guess it's possible these debates currently surrounding regulation of Facebook could extend to their cryptocurrency, but I don't see how that will educate the larger public about money. Her next point I completely agree with, but I'm not so sure if we'll have a positive outcome from the scenario. Quote, this project will create a huge data honeypot for governments globally, with all the privacy and tax reporting implications such a data honeypot entails. It will enable government officials who want to track every dollar spent. I've long maintained financial transaction reporting requirements won't pass a U.S. constitutional challenge. How interesting if Facebook were at the center of such a challenge. Would it fight or fold? Close quote. Yeah, I don't know about that. Like I was saying earlier about the discussion surrounding Facebook. And then lastly, she talks about how ultimately this will just be a detour for people to find their way into Bitcoin, and how this is something we've just recently seen in Venezuela with the introduction of the petro and ensuing spike in Bitcoin volume there. All right, so that's our crypto Twitter legal perspective speculation for the global coin or Libra network, whatever it's going to be. What do you guys think about this position and global coin and the prospects of that?
Yeah. Well, really the whole thing, or what, I just realized I had my mic up. The whole thing is just absurd to me. Like, first, it's going to peg its value to a basket of currencies as opposed to a single currency. And that's just incredibly stupid, because when you look at current stable coins, like the whole rationale is, I have this dollar and here's this stable coin backed by it. It doesn't matter what the value of that dollar is in real terms. If you hold those dollars and don't lose them, it's backed. Like, there is no risk here. Now, when you start introducing a whole basket of currencies that can potentially fluctuate wildly in terms of value across each other, you have a huge complexity now in the value of what's backing your coin. Like, you've just gotten rid of the simplicity of this thing is always equal to this thing. And like that fluctuation creates an instability in terms of the purchasing power of the actual token backed by all of that stuff. So that just seems incredibly stupid to me. And then just the overall idea of Facebook doing something like this. I mean, $10 million to run a node is going to be a federated thing with legal obligations limited to licensed businesses. And ultimately, I don't see how this goes any direction except just being another version of a conventional bank with KYC AML requirements, freezing people's money. And I can't wait for some oppressive governments all over the place to start demanding money seizure or freezing for somebody in their country using it who they don't want using it. Like this, I don't see how this actually really fundamentally changes anything or brings any new value to the table. It's just the same as the old with a new person doing it.
Well, first they say you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the word. So look, you can complain about this thing, but this is going to revolutionize the world. I think it's obvious. And maybe I might even consider to become a Facebook maximalist.
Bitch, do I have to fly to fucking Berlin and slap the shit out of you?
Yeah, so for sure, Facebook. What, Janine, you were going to say something?
I mean, this is probably a stupid question, but in order to use GlobalCoin, I assume that you have to be a Facebook user, right?
Oh, yeah. You got to be a
Yeah.
user that's KYC'd and personally identified, supposedly.
Yeah, I mean that leaves me out because there is no sugar mountain. By the way, that's what Zuckerberg's name translates to in German. There is no sugar mountain on this earth that would bring me back to Facebook.
Yeah, I don't think I would either. It is, I'm sure it's definitely going to be something that a lot of people take advantage of, but I'm not sure because I'm not entirely sure because their user base has been shrinking drastically ever since the 2016 election, and people have come to know like their, motives behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think their user base mainly shrunk in the, 18 to 25 age category. Like, I don't know anyone personally, no one around me, I don't know anyone who uses Facebook anymore, except for like some people will do it just because like I have some friends on there. So they've used like automated apps that repost things to Facebook. But other than that, like seriously, why are you on Facebook?
Well, the only thing that holds me still there is that I can foresee my mother and my grandmother would be really angry if I deleted the only connection.
Yes, that exactly. It's our parents and grandparents who are on there, but most young people are not signing up to Facebook anymore.
Yeah, it's such a weird, awkward circumstance leaving there. Like I had to put a post up and that I left there for a week where I was like, look, just to let you guys know, I'm leaving this platform for the week, but here's some other platforms I'm on. And by the end of the week, I'm out of here. And just to like let people know that, yeah, it wasn't about not wanting to talk to them. It was because of the practices behind Facebook. And yeah, it just like that's the kind of thing that does worry me, where if this does become some big crypto bank for the users of Facebook, is Facebook global coin going to be the prisoner coin of our parents? I mean, like then we're going to have to tell them you got to break out. It's time for Bitcoin.
Remember when it used to be cool among the young peoples to, if you had a Facebook account before the age of 13, that was like a steal. Now it's like, what are you doing? That's lame.
All right, I hate you because now I have Neil Young stuck in my head, Janine.
Sing
Oh,
it.
to live on Sugar Mountain.
Can you even have a Facebook account before age of 13? Shinobi, can you have one?
I don't know if they
Not without my
changed
mommy
the
and
rules.
daddy saying it's okay. I need mommy and daddy's permission.
No one got that. Come on.
I guess that's yeah, I guess we'll see how this plays out. Honestly, this is just something that I think we kind of put off talking about because we know it's something that ultimately is not really going to pan out. But like I'm saying, I mean, all the details on it are not out yet. We should be seeing that sometime this next week coming up. So on June 18th, to be exact. So yeah, if there's not anything else more about global coin, we can start talking about some EU people getting pissed at people in Malta.
I mean, I'm kind of confused as to, because one of the news items in this article is something that happened in March. So I'm not even sure anyone's actually pissed anymore. They might have been pissed a while ago. But anyway, surprise, surprise, everyone. The European country that every crypto person and their mother is touting as the ICO haven and prime Bitcoin conference territory has come under scrutiny by the financial regulators of the European Union. Did not see that coming. And of course, we're talking about Malta. This isn't really new news, but back in March of this year, the Malta Financial Services Authority, MFSA, due to the increased scrutiny of, concern about money laundering, they have partnered or did partner with the crypto security firm CipherTrace to, quote, identify and prevent crypto crime. And they will be tasked with auditing crypto asset services that operate within Malta's jurisdiction and may require, or not they, but the MFSA may require custodial exchanges, wallets, and initial coin offering people to register with them. So that's really all I have to say. Apparently some people in the EU is like, yep, can't be too loose there, Malta. And then, yep, partner with CipherTrace. That's about it.
Man,
Okay, we'll
wrong account.
okay though. We'll get right on pretending like we're actually doing something.
All right, yeah. So I guess that was a little bit older news, but yeah, it's been a slow news week, like you're saying, digging around for stuff. But I'm just like looking up to see, like, I wonder if that's like right after whenever they built their blockchain alliance between like all those nations was soon after this came down as like a result from it.
Well, when was that conference that happened where everyone had their avatars in the form of medieval knights?
Malta.
Yeah, like did everyone expect that they could just hold a big event like that and nothing would happen? Like, did you think that wasn't going to attract attention? Like, of course they're
What
gonna.
happened? Did something happen?
No, I mean, the only thing that's happened is that the European Union financial regulators are like, hey, Malta, we're seeing all this new. I mean, they didn't actually say this, but this is what I think happened. Like, Malta, we've seen all this news about like Bitcoin people and ICO people wanting to do conferences and possibly move to your country. Why is that? Oh, it turns out you've implemented some pretty loose rules recently. Maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe so, to prevent us from like looking even closer at you, you should partner with a blockchain analytics firm. That's basically what happened. Like, I don't know how we didn't see this coming.
Oh, hey, man. And it had to be that CipherTrace. I don't know. Those guys are marketed everywhere. I mean, like, isn't that the same crew that's sponsoring that Bitcoin conference in San Francisco?
Yeah, they are. And hope, because Bitcoin 2019 San Francisco, I actually tweeted at them because, they had that whole incident with, basically selling attendee data to the sponsors. I asked them, if they were planning to share the financial records of attendees, like attendees who purchase with Bitcoin, are they going to share those transactions with CipherTrace, which can then be used to de-anonymize people? And they never answered me. Of course, evidence or absence of evidence is not, or whatever the phrase goes. Anyway, kind of concerned that they didn't answer me because that account actually follows me for some reason. It's like, why are you going to follow me if you're not going to answer my tweets? But whatever.
Yeah, there's definitely some weird stuff going on there. I mean, like, this is kind of tied to it. Like, just in a similar vein about this, where it's like these conferences, you have people speaking that don't necessarily represent us. And, this Malta, I mean, the whole, Adam Back is speaking at the G20 summit, the next G20 thing. Have you seen that? Where it's just like, they're having.
Oh, dear.
What do you think of that?
Why? Is this kind of like a, change hearts and minds kind of operation? Are we trying to go that route?
Maybe so. I mean, geez, gotta have a
I don't think so. I mean, good luck, but I don't think it's going to do anything.
I hope he's got a security detail with him. All right. Any more comments on this one?
Adam
You
Back.
can't be 20 on Sugar Mountain.
All right. Nopar, did you have one more thing?
Yeah, just one more thing, that Adam Beck is a Microsoft shill. Yeah. He met the CEO of Microsoft with Samsung. If you remember of that Twitter photo that they posted, they are best friends now.
Yeah,
So,
and he
they
told
are
them to
establishment.
because he told them just delete Windows and just maintain a Linux distro.
Adam Beck was a Microsoft employee, did you know?
Oh, yeah, he's with us.
Yeah, but I mean, like any guy who's over 40 or 50 years old has at one point in their life probably been a Microsoft employee. Like, that's not a...
Do you wanna apply with me, Shinobi?
No.
All right. So that was fun. So let's move on here and talk about some stuff going on overseas. All right, guys. We know there are a few Asian markets in the cryptocurrency space that play a big role in volume across exchanges. One of those markets is South Korea, whose quick introduction in the space played a major role in a lot of the ICO pump of 2017. And they've also been the primary target for experienced North Korean hackers. It was the perfect storm of dumb money that cooled off a lot of investors and worried regulators. Well, it's good to see companies over there are working together to provide a solution for the market. Bitcoin has covered a report out of Business Korea that says South Korea's largest bank by assets, Kookmin, has partnered with a local cryptocurrency startup developing custody solutions called Atom Riggs Lab. Lee Koo-il, CEO of Kookmin Bank, said, quote, "We hope that the two companies will grow together by discovering innovative services in the field of digital asset management with this agreement. We will expand the digital ecosystem through cooperation," close quote. While there hasn't yet been any product discussed that they'll bring to market, Business Korea goes on to say, quote, "The two will jointly study digital asset protection technology and smart contract application methods, while also opting to explore new business opportunities in the field of digital assets. In addition, the two companies have agreed to cooperate with each other in the creation of a bridge ecosystem between the blockchain network and finance," close quote. All of this sounds like it will be good news for regulators and some market participants. We still need to see what exactly they're building and who will be holding the private keys, but this appears to be a growing trend amongst areas where regulators talk about beefing up AML regulations. On top of all this, Bitcoinist reports the world's second largest insurer, Medico, announced it will now be offering crypto custody insurance from a deal made with the company Aon. Metco CEO and founder Adrian Trechini said, quote, "Insurance is an essential requirement for banking clients, and Medico is excited to be able to facilitate insurance for our clients through the leading broker of crypto insurance solutions," close quote. So with that, it looks like the South Korean market will soon have a custody solution for digital assets backed up by insurers, which I'm sure will interest some people. But like I said earlier, we will have to see how they handle the private keys and who exactly is going to be using this product. But all of this does sound like it will be a boom for adoption over there. What do you guys think about this story?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, a good thing to see products like this pop up in new jurisdictions. I mean, there's really nothing we can do to prevent things like this existing. So, I mean, really at the end of the day, it's, I think, a better situation the more different companies or institutions in different jurisdictions start doing this. I mean, it's ideal that everybody would just manage their own Bitcoin, but that's just realistically not going to happen. So, I mean, the next best thing is just having a very good jurisdictional distribution in terms of Bitcoin being custodied by institutions on people's behalf.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it, BitGo partnering with South Dakota there to try and bring some sort of actual bank into the picture with custody. But, we don't know how that's set up yet. And I know that Wyoming has got things in place to where they have that full reserve backed bank. And yeah, I mean, that seemed to be the best way to do it. But I mean, there's going to be different products and people building different things. And like you're saying, in different jurisdictions, this one does look to be like a positive development for the space. Is there any more comment on this one?
I think we're good to move on.
All right, so that was a positive development in a jurisdiction. Let's talk about a negative one. All right, well, it has been a slow news week, which got me peering into some of the familiar spots to see if anything new has popped up. And it looks like India didn't disappoint. But with the news, yeah, it did disappoint. Okay, so India put together a piece of draft legislation called the Banning Cryptocurrencies and Regulation of Official Digital Currency Bill 2019, which the name does kind of say it all. This is a heavy-handed approach towards the cryptocurrency space. The bill says mining, generating, holding, buying, selling, or dealing in cryptocurrencies directly or indirectly will become illegal in the country, and the offense would be deemed consignable and non-bailable. The fine for those accused will be either 3 times the loss of cost to the system or 3 times the profit made, whichever is higher. And the accused could still face up to 10 years in prison. If the bill becomes law, then market participants will have only 90 days to declare and dispose of any cryptocurrencies in their portfolio. This bill shouldn't be taken lightly, as it was drafted under the Economic Affairs Secretary and a panel including India's central bank, members of the Securities and Exchange Board of India, and the Central Board of Direct Taxes, and some investigative agencies. If this bill passes, it will be detrimental to India's future economy, and I can only hope those over there fighting haven't given into this battle. It's been a long-running fight since early 2018 when all this discussion started. The government there has been headlong trying to squash out cryptocurrency while going back and forth on creating their own digital currency. Last time we spoke about this topic, the RBI said it had no interest in creating a digital rupee. Well, this bill reintroduced that idea. So it looks like in a few years, every digital currency in India could hold hefty fines with possible prison time, except for their digital rupee. Honestly, this looks awful, and I hope we see some real pushback from the Indian population. What do you guys think about this bill and the cryptocurrency climate over there?
Yeah, I mean, it's if this were to go into law, I mean, this would pretty much be the worst possible scenario for anybody holding Bitcoin or crypto in the country. I mean, especially with the clause of a 90-day grace period to declare and dispose of anything. I mean, that pretty much says it all to me, that they will be collecting records from exchanges and other businesses and would have a very good rough idea of what people actually own. So as far as any person that's ever actually registered an account or traded on an exchange or business that keeps transaction records, there really is no plausible deniability that would fly with the government. And I think, at that point, the only people who would really have any kind of chance of pulling off continuing to hold their Bitcoin would be people who have exclusively dealt with peer-to-peer cash markets. And I mean, anybody who's bought anything over a KYC'd exchange, like there would be no excuse. Anything still on the exchange is beyond their control, and anything they've withdrawn, there's going to be a record of that to their name. And so, like, there's really no way around that. And that's even likely going to create, if this were to pass, the situation where, let's say somebody has bought Bitcoin and withdrawn it from an exchange, but then moved on to spend it or sell it in some other way. How do you prove that? Like, there is really no way to definitively prove you don't have those coins anymore. And so this would really be just the worst nightmare scenario for a Bitcoiner in India.
Yeah, it sounds like the possible prison time is just to, frighten everybody into getting rid of what they can. And I think, let's see, I think it was First Order in the chat who said, yeah, India is just the biggest bag holder of gold. I mean, they do have a large stockpile of gold in that country, and we have seen them, place a war on currency already with getting rid of certain denominations that are hurting the poor populations there. And I mean, India looks like a beautiful country. I'd like to visit there, but for sure they've got some major issues when it comes to governing the society. I mean, there's just a large destitute population there, and living right next to high-rise billionaires, and kind of the worst way you can actually see that dichotomy that's playing out throughout the global economic system, really. So hopefully, like we're saying, I mean, there are some guys there with India. Like I know Unopay's there, and I mean, like I don't know how they've been doing since this whole thing really kicked off. I know that they tried to launch an ATM and that didn't work out. And but I mean, hopefully the same guys that were fighting this in the beginning are still fighting it, and there could be some major pushback on it because it is some big players that are pushing this bill forward. So hopefully there's enough interest to fight it. I mean, because if not, and this thing does get implemented, yeah, it could be very destructive towards their ecosystem in the future, their economy.
And just a world of hell for anybody who has Bitcoin over there. I mean, the last couple times we've talked about this, we've said really if this were to actually happen, like this would be really the biggest full scale test as far as can Bitcoin function in this type of environment where it is literally completely outlawed. And if so, how that would actually play out. But it's, I'm just really conflicted on this because on the one hand, I want to see whether Bitcoin could actually thrive in that environment. But to actually get to that point, like this would literally destroy people's lives. Like anybody who misjudged the amount of information or records on them could literally have their life completely derailed and ruined if they try to hold on to something and not declare it to the government when they're already aware of it. And it's like I don't really know how to sit here and look at this now that it's actually a proposed draft bill, because the one side of me wants to see how Bitcoin could actually handle this, but then I just think about what this would actually mean for individual people, and that would just be horrible.
Yeah, if you're holding Bitcoin and this thing starts to look like it's coming down, and you got that 90-day grace period, I would start looking for other places to set up shop because yeah, it does appear to be that bad. Hopefully, like we're saying, it's just a draft. It's going to change. I mean, they've been back and forth on all this for so long, but it does seem like the major push has been in this direction towards really hurting the economy, the cryptocurrency system over there. All right, so let's get out of that stuff and talk about something cool, man. Like, what's this global mesh all about?
Yeah, so it's a new group set up, Global Mesh Labs, that has been established to work on a protocol that Richard Myers from Gotenna has been working on, that I think is a pretty interesting attempt to solve a lot of issues with mesh networks. And really, like where do I start? But like, I guess the first thing I could say is when you're looking at mesh networks, there's really two hard categories and distinctions to make. Kind of like a stationary network with static nodes. Like, I think you've actually talked about this before, the Althea project in Colorado, Rick, where they're actually trying to replace the ISP you would use at your home. So they're stationary nodes on a mesh network to kind of replace access at your home. And they're not changing, they're not moving. And then on the other side, you have like an ad hoc mesh net, kind of what Gotenna is doing. Like nodes are constantly dropping in and out. They're not stationary. They're mobile devices that are kind of creating connections as they go. And the issue with that is kind of the availability and the incentive to actually relay things can get very different. And so what Richard's done here is he's designed this Lot 49 protocol that would attempt to use the Lightning Network as a way to incentivize honest message passing in the network. And I think, this is a very interesting use for the Lightning Network, because one of the real core uses, aside from people futzing around making manual micropayments, is actually being able to meter things like bandwidth or network resources. And I think he's put a lot of thought into actually how this could function. And so really the two main aspects of this is, in terms of requirements to actually construct this, are that this is going to require Schnorr signatures with aggregate signatures, so musig, and sig hash no input. And the reason is it's kind of a very tricky dynamic when you're trying to deploy Lightning Network in this way, because one, this kind of radio relay and a mesh network has very low bandwidth availability. So you really have to be as efficient as possible in your use of data that you're relaying across the network. And two, just because a lot of these nodes are going to be offline most of the time. And that's really the whole point of a kind of mesh net like this, is there are only going to be very few nodes overall that have a direct connection to the internet that can kind of bridge the offline nodes in the mesh net to the overall network of the internet. And so it kind of requires being very efficient with data structure. And it's also going to require kind of some rethinking of how you actually deploy Lightning Network and how that interacts with the base layer of Bitcoin. And so first, I'm going to go into just kind of the general idea of the tweaks in Lightning Network. So obviously, when you're making a Lightning payment, currently in the normal deployment, I communicate with the endpoint I'm trying to pay outside of the Lightning Network, and they generate the pre-image for the hash lock and give it to me, and I relay that to them through the Lightning Network, where they release the pre-image in order to actually complete the payment. While that's not really a viable option when you're looking at a kind of mesh net structure like this, and the whole point of me making a payment is to get a message to you, because the only way to do so is through the mesh network. So one of the core tweaks here in order to make this work is actually to have the sender of the message and the payment actually generate the pre-image. And one of the first things some of you may be thinking is, well, what's to stop somebody from relaying a message, the person receiving it, and then letting the payment fail? Well, each hop along the way in message relaying and the receiver of the message are paid through that payment. So you're not just giving a micropayment to each hop, but also the person receiving it. And you pretty much bundle the pre-image for the Lightning payment with the message that you're giving to that person. And so anybody who actually receives a message through the mesh network is going to have an incentive to release that payment, because at the end of it, they're getting paid just for receiving that message. And so it's kind of aligning the incentives properly in a nice, succinct way, so that you don't really run into this issue of me just piggybacking a message that isn't actually going to get paid for in terms of the intermediary nodes along the way. And I think that's a real elegant way of kind of handling this. Now, the real tricky part here is, obviously the general idea is that each node in the mesh network in geographic proximity would kind of open channels with the nodes and range of them, so that you can actually have a lined up symmetry between the payment channel linkages in the network and the actual physical linkages of the mesh nodes that can relay messages to each other. Now, the big problem here is, obviously, a Lightning channel is capable of theft in a worst case scenario where somebody is not able to actually watch the chain and see a theft attempt happen to penalize it. So you kind of have to create a structure here where these nodes, who the majority of are going to be offline most of the time, can still react to that and do so efficiently. And this is kind of where L2 comes into the picture, in that you're not going to have to constantly be spamming updates to a bridge node connected to the internet so that a watchtower has every single previous channel state penalty information available. It's just the most current one. And so this is kind of addressed in two different ways, one of which is still kind of under consideration. The first, obviously, is that you're going to have longer timeout periods than your typical Lightning channel. The figure they talk about in the paper is maybe around a week. And obviously, because you have to have that longer period where nodes who are offline most of the time can periodically check in and respond correctly to any theft attempt going on with their channel. And so really a lot of this is dependent on these bridge nodes that are actually going to be connected to the internet. And in the protocol terms, they're called witness nodes. And really this is, I think, the weakest point of the protocol, but I still think this is very much a workable thing overall, is each node in the mesh net effectively has to have a witness node or multiple nodes to cross-reference that they trust to give them an insight into the state of the actual Bitcoin network and the blockchain. And so when going through the process of opening a channel or closing a channel, they would effectively be trusting these witness nodes to correctly inform them that a funding or a closing has actually happened. And that's really the kind of one core weak point here, because most of these nodes are going to be disconnected from the internet. You kind of need this role to be filled by the handful of internet connected nodes in order for all of this to work. And the longer timeout period gives offline nodes the time to actually respond to any kind of malicious action on the part of their peers. And now the next part is it comes into the watchtower aspect. Now, obviously, in a normal internet connected subset of the Lightning Network, if you are using a watchtower, every single payment you make is also going to be accompanied with a message to a watchtower to give them the necessary penalty information in that state, or in the case of L2, to give them the most recent channel state so that they can replace an older one and only have to keep the recent one. Now, there's really two kind of ways you could potentially do this. Is just kind of eat that overhead of constantly giving states to a watchtower through a bridge node or a witness node in the mesh network. But that would be very bandwidth inefficient in terms of any node that's offline would have to relay a message to a witness node to get to a watchtower every time they make a payment. So you're at least doubling the bandwidth use, and you're going to have to pay for that, because the whole gist of this protocol is that message passing on the mesh network is something paid for over Lightning. Or another way you could handle that, and I think this, in the context of this specific protocol, is probably the best way to do this, is simply have the witness node alert you if they see one of your channels being closed or closed with an old state. And then only then would you relay the necessary information to the witness node to send to the Bitcoin network in order to respond to a malicious channel closure. And in this way, you don't actually have to constantly eat this bandwidth overhead of making sure that a watchtower is aware of your current state to deal with it on their own. You would simply wait for the alert from a witness bridge node and then pass the requisite data, saving bandwidth, saving money for the message relaying, just at the expense of obviously having to trust this witness node to actually alert you. And again, like this can be done by depending on multiple witness nodes to allow cross-referencing. And now I'm not going to go too far into the details, but the last part of the protocol is really just kind of trying to be as efficient as possible with data usage in terms of passing information around, especially between a normal offline node in the mesh net and a witness node. And they've kind of constructed a way for savings in terms of passing things like address information in a transaction or amounts and such, and introduced the idea of nodes locally caching this kind of information so that you can simply pass it once in first interacting with a node, and then from that point on can use shorter hash identifiers so that a node such as a witness node could simply see this short identifier and then reconstruct some of the transaction information from what it has locally cached. And in this way, you can kind of boil it down so that most of a transaction can just be inferred from shorter informational hints as to what the content is. And the only information that cannot do this is the signature, which again comes to part of the reason why this protocol is dependent on Schnorr and aggregate signatures. You cannot mathematically do anything to hint at a signature. It has to be passed in full. And so the aggregate signature structure allows a lot of space savings here. And in this way, you can kind of eat that little bit of overhead when first communicating with somebody to give them the full information. And then they can maintain their own tables at that point to just reference it locally and only have to pass around these shorter hint identifiers. And so obviously, this is not something that can be deployed as of yet because we are still waiting on both Schnorr signatures with MuSig support as well as L2 support through SIG hash no input. But they are planning on kind of deploying a test net to kind of work at and implement this and work out a lot of the kinks or bugs that might pop up, and then slowly move towards actually shifting the deployment to the main Bitcoin network as Schnorr and L2 become available. And I don't think that this will actually happen, but they do point out that if for some reason, which I think unbelievably unlikely, that those deployments don't actually happen on the Bitcoin network, that they could deploy a federated sidechain with those features and then build this mesh network protocol on top of that federated sidechain. But, I think overall, despite, the one weak point of requiring interaction with these witness bridge nodes in order to have a full idea of the state of the blockchain on the main network, I think that this is really an incredible idea. And I think this can go a long way towards really incentivizing a robust and available ad hoc mesh network for a lot of low bandwidth communication uses. And, I'm really excited to see this be fully dropped. I've actually met Richard in person a few times, and we've kind of talked about some of these types of things. And it's nice to actually be able to go through the full paper and protocol, as opposed to just kind of having these conversations with little hints and more abstract description of things. But I think that this can be a very useful thing just for, censorship resistant, redundant communication networks that don't depend on just blindly trusting a phone provider or an ISP to actually get your message where you want it to go.
Yeah, man, this definitely does sound like an interesting project. I mean, like you were saying, I mean, there is this Althea mesh here locally, where they're trying to build that out. And it's always sort of seemed like a project where it sounds interesting, but I mean, it's built on top of Ethereum. And I was just looking through their most recent development report, and it looks like they recently had a vulnerability exposed. But I mean, it's just, there's more and more of this stuff coming out where it's like, where I was just saying, like, well, why not use a federated sidechain instead of this ERC20? Like because a lot of this Althea is also based completely off of Infura validation, where they rely on Infura servers to validate the chain. And there's just a lot of this trust that goes into it, where if you're really trying to build out a mesh network, you want something like this, where now I could say, even with the Lightning Network, why not? Like, let's do that with this Lot 49 protocol. I mean, having, more honest nodes out there to actually keep track of everything, that's going to help the system, actually build out in a way where it actually remains accountable and, gains that efficiency where, this whole Althea project, like I was saying, it's interesting, but I mean, it's just kind of built on the back of something where I think it's kind of doomed from the start. But this idea, I mean, it's interesting enough to where maybe I could get I mean, there's definitely a Lightning developer here, and there's a few people that are really passionate about mesh networks more so than cryptocurrencies, and they don't really care which one it is that's going to solve this problem, just as long as they solve the problem. And I've talked to them here locally, and they want to try and build this out, this Althea thing out. Well, now maybe I can bring this up to them and sort of help them develop this in parallel.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would really like to see something like this either ported or applied to like more stationary high bandwidth networks, because I mean, like, it really is a dangerous thing to have like these single ISPs with geographic monopolies as like the only way people can really interface with the internet. And I mean, I don't think anytime soon, if ever, we would be able to completely decentralize something like, tier one networks or backbone networks and lines. But it would be a whole new game if that last mile ISP people use to plug into those bigger networks were more distributed and, a lot more difficult to really isolate and censor any individual. And I think, that's something people need to start taking seriously.
Heck yeah, man. Like I say, and I know there are some people taking that real seriously here. The internet traffic, bandwidth availability out in these mountains is pretty atrocious. And it's not like there's people that wouldn't pay to get that high bandwidth out there.
No para, you got any brain noggins spitting out your head? Got some thoughts?
No, actually, as I said, my hearing is not good, and I kind of for one, my cognitive ability is just so much worse than it would have been. And the other thing is, like, I'm hearing you guys like background noise, so it's really hard when you go into some really complicated subject. I just couldn't understand that. Yeah.
That's all right, man. You've been flying all over the place. Just close your eyes and we'll get Shinobi to sing some more Neil Diamond. All right, though. Yeah.
If you don't have any stories, then I go into mine.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Udi Wertheimer gave a presentation in the Breaking Bitcoin conference that was called Breaking Wasabi, and there he described 2 attacks on Wasabi, and I'm going to go into them now. And the first attack was he actually gave a really good example, which actually I'm going to just give back 100% because it's funny. So there are 3 people: Hodl Notes, Dr. Wright, and Maxwell. And you have to know that Dr. Wright has more money than your country, which is important. So he's a worthy adversary. he wants to sue Hodlernaut, but first he has to figure out who Hodlernaut is. And then he knows that Hodlernaut was donating something to somewhere from a Wasabi output, and he knows that Maxwell was using another Wasabi output, Wasabi mixed output to another transaction. And now he has to prove that there is the link, so he can sue the puppet master of Hodlernaut, who is Maxwell. So how he's doing that? I think actually Chris Badger calls it the mystery shopper attack or similar to that. Anyway, Wright sent money to both of the outputs, and then he's sending the money in a way that it just adds up the denomination, and then Wasabi will enqueue them together to the next round. And so he just proved that Hodlernaut and Maxwell is the same person because he sent money to both things, and he knows that those are their outputs, and Wasabi enqueued them, and that's it. So it's really interesting because at first when I heard this, I mean I just said it's Udi misunderstood how Wasabi works because Wasabi doesn't enqueue it like that. Why would it do it? It doesn't. But it actually did, because there was a bug, and yeah, he actually tested this. So there was a bug where I knew already it's a code smell. I was checking the labels of the transactions, and if it starts with zero link, then I decide to enqueue it or not. So I did not go back and look at if it's a already queued coin. If it's, because what I would have to done is that I have to check if it's an already queued coin, and if it's spending an already queued coin, that's when I would have to automatically enqueue into Wasabi this next round. But I didn't do that. I was just checking the label, and if it's a zero link label, that's when I automatically enqueue it. Of course, there are other conditions like the mixing has to be happening already, and it has to be less than the target anonymity set and things like that. But anyway, this is the important condition here. So, and Wasabi was just doing that because as you send money to the same address, it's gonna inherit the label from the UTXO on the same address, because it's an address reuse. So you have to show that hey, this transaction is actually with the same label. The same people know about it. But anyway, this confused Wasabi. So this was the first attack. This was fixed in a way that, well, it's the automatic enqueuing part is fixed, right? So if the user is enqueuing the same two coins, now it's not fixed in that way, because in the mix they can still correlate those things together if the user is manually doing that. So that's not fixed. But on the other hand, at least you got some money. if someone is really doing this has to be targeted, and I'm not sure I see any better way to handle this other than this automatic enqueuing thing. so it's partially fixed. It's not fixed if the user is doing it manually and queuing those coins, those he got from Craig. That's for one attack. And the second attack is even more problematic, or yes, it's definitely more problematic. It's about, so he described one attack, but there is actually two attacks there, and both of them are what I can do with the coordinator. Okay, so the attack that he might have described, he probably not, I didn't hear that is the underlying issue is that for me, adding peer into a round, it actually more profitable than not adding it. Of course, up to a point, but anyway, in some conditions, it's more profitable because there is a network fees and there are the coordinator fees, and if there are X. Yeah, I'm not going the calculations live, but the point is that it can be more profitable, or it's more profitable right now with the current network conditions. But the issue that, and for this, I don't have a good solution yet. There are a couple of ideas on GitHub, and we are talking about this, but it's like nothing really seems like a great thing to do. And if you want to go into it, this was actually one of the things that where we deviated from the zero link research, because the zero link, the original idea was that, okay, you take 0.3% fee as a fixed 0.3% fee, and then this wouldn't matter that I put in peers in the rounds, because doesn't matter, because other people won't pay more for more anonymity set. They always pay 0.3%. But then we were like, well, fuck, we promised 100 peers to mix with, and we only have like 6 or 12 in the first month. So it's not cool that we are taking that much. So we should adjust it to the anonymity sets. So that's how we ended up having, instead of 0.3%, we ended up having 0.003% multiplied by the anonymity set, which at 100 people adds up to 0.3%. So anyway, this was the idea, to make it cheaper and reflect more the provided service. It looked like it backfired now, because now if we put back more and more people into the rounds from our side, then we are getting more out of it than what we are putting back. Yeah, something like that. Anyway, this is an ongoing discussion on this issue. The other issue, what Udi brought up, is that, well, what if I collude with a miner? Because right now, if I don't collude with a miner, then I cannot really do much. Just put 1-200 peers into a round, and then Bitcoin is standards problems coming up. So it's not like we would be able to take too much money. But what if we collude with a miner, and then we put in, what was his number? 10,000 or 6,000, something like that, thousands of other peers, then we would be able to steal a significant amounts of money from the the participants. I don't really know what's the final number. It's like 1 megabyte block. How many peers that would be able to provide? But anyway, so this is the issue with that. If we collude with a miner and we put in many peers, then we would be able to steal a significant amount, or supposedly. So luckily, yeah.
Okay, so pretty much the idea is because your fee goes up if the anonymity set goes up. So if you collaborated with a miner to include a transaction the size of a whole block to get around the policy relay limit, then you could just like drive the fee the coordinator takes through the roof, right?
Yes. Yes, and luckily there is a very easy fix for this. So you just have to look at on the client side. You just have to put a maximum limit as, okay, that I don't pay more than 100 people. No matter what happens, I don't pay more. That's the maximum I would be paying. Otherwise, I don't sign the transaction. So yeah, that's the fix for it. None of them were really issues. Those would require responsible disclosure. But Udi was talking to me about these things, and so he still did this. So yeah, in this case, you don't need responsible disclosure in the attack too, because the thing that he would tell me, right, and I'm the one who would able to execute this attack. So it makes no sense. On attack one, it doesn't really matter because it's like it's a very expensive attack. So it's not something that many people would do, or like, yeah, you have to have a very specific target. You have to know very specific informations, and then you have to put 0.1 Bitcoin together, and then you still need to get lucky that actually the user is going to do what you think the user is going to do. So that's not that problematic either. But the most problematic part is the part that as we put more peers into it, then we get back more money. So right, that's definitely bad incentive, and that's something that we have to figure out.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems like really the core of the issues can just be solved with client side logic. I mean, doesn't sound that bad, really. Right.
Yeah, but the problem is with this kind of client side logic is that you put restrictions now, so later you will not be able to extend and fix stuff because the client side restrictions are just so severe. It's like the Bitcoin hard fork or soft fork. No, a hard fork. Sorry, a soft fork. A soft fork is always strictening the rules. So they say, I'm not sure, it's better. And a hard fork is you can loosen the rules. So this is a soft fork. You have to be very careful about this. Otherwise, you would need a hard fork.
Mm-hmm. Well, you made a bug. Bad, no para. Bad.
Well, I mean, it's good to have guys like Udi out there tearing it down and just like trying to figure out a way to break it and report back to you with this. And, just like you're saying, I mean, an easy sort of client side fix and just making sure that there's a best practice there for people to avoid that sort of thing. And the other issue is something that you are working on. So, yeah, I mean, good work there, Udi.
Any more comments on this, or I have a quick note?
Move along.
All right, I just wanted to bring this up, guys, because I know, especially Janine likes to talk about this kind of topics, that CNN is shutting down because Google update made their website less relevant. So, yeah.
Wait, CNN or
CCN.
Sorry,
Damn it.
sorry.
Not CNN. I want CNN to shut down.
Mm.
Yeah, so you see Google updates something and how a company is going down. It's crazy. On the other hand, what did you think about CCN?
Are you asking me? I don't have an opinion. I like barely ever read their articles.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like they're not even close to like Bitcoin Magazine, for instance. But I wouldn't quite put them on like the same level as like CoinDesk or Cointelegraph either. I mean, you know, they were a news site for the most part, but I can't think of a single time they've ever actually like covered anything in depth journalistically. It is more just like news blurbs and things like that.
Yeah, Reddit is pissed at them, actually. It's like they consider it as a spammy site. I don't know. I didn't notice anything really notorious from them, so
No, they definitely had some. I don't know. They're in like early 2018. It feels like they started doing a lot more stuff that wasn't even crypto related. It just sort of became another news site, and next thing you know, like I guess yeah, they started. Do you know why exactly they got pushed out of the Google search? Was it because of some sort of fake news issue?
no. It just Google updated their algorithm. Other Bitcoin news sites went down on the list too. So it just Google is not going to show their thing that often. That's what it is.
Jeez, Google needs to work on a lot of things. I mean, and you know, they just sort of become the only people. I mean, that's why I would stick to DuckDuckGo at this point. I try to just to make sure, you know, I don't know, just to send the traffic somewhere else because they need to get off that hill.
You see, just one quick thing that I never understood these Bitcoin news sites. Okay, I understood that it's a good business model. You create something that has traffic, and then you start selling ICO advertisements, and there is the money. But what I didn't understand is that what do they want to really achieve? Because news sites don't just appear. It's like newspapers and televisions are going on the internet to become news sites to keep up with the thing, which they don't really succeed. But people don't really. I don't know people who are really like looking at a newspaper, a news site on the internet like every day. It seems to me like something that's just trending out and not trending in for a very long time now. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really just like you're saying. I mean, it came in with the 2017, right before the ICOs. We really started to see like organizations sort of step up and be like, well, we're going to handle the crypto news, you know, most notably the CNBC crowd. But I think like basically what you're talking about is like an overall fight between like what is news and what isn't news, and like nowadays we're seeing lots more stories come down the pipe that have nothing to do with reality but really just to try and push a narrative that censors groups of people on the internet. So it's the whole idea of what is news and stuff, that stuff is moving forward and changing at a rapid pace.
Oh no, sorry, I did not articulate it properly. My point was that the concept of online newspapers is going out of trend for a very long time now, since the social media, because people are not going on the newspaper to look at it, but they are reading the news. Those are on their social media, and people prefer the news. Those are not from a newspaper, but rather from a blog or from a company announcement or from something source that has more soul to it, right? It's a newspaper. It just there is something no, probably not even any quality. You know what I mean? It's I think that's the trend now, but I can be wrong about it.
Media has been going to shit for like the last 10 years. I mean, it just is what it is.
Yeah, it's definitely a dying medium. Or like we're saying, I mean, it's changing, and definitely the whole traditional idea of like a one place to get your news, and that's where you confirm your facts has changed. Yeah, it's not the same anymore. Going out of style, like you're saying. All right.
Yeah. Anyway, so Janine, last Assange update of the season. Oh,
Oh, we're not going to talk about the conference that I didn't want to go to.
but we already did.
Yeah, we covered that.
Yes. Yeah, so as we said, this was the last show of the season, and originally the first substantive extradition hearing for Julian Assange was originally scheduled to be held today, but for reasons that have not been provided, it was postponed to Friday, June 14th. So can't cover that in this season. Unlike Bitcoin and cryptocurrency stuff, it has been anything but a slow news week since our last episode, because on June 6th and 7th, there was a reporter from the Gateway Pundit who interviewed an inmate from Belmarsh prison and actually received photos of Assange, who this prisoner was apparently taking photos surreptitiously using a contraband cell phone or some other specialized recording device. And so that anonymous prisoner claimed that they wanted to raise awareness of the truth of Assange's case. And there's this whole GoFundMe that they started to raise money to get a particular lawyer that they were confident in, but we're not really sure about the motives of this person. There's a lot of speculation around that, but the video that the photos came from, there was actually a video that was sent to Ruptly, which they released, and it's a 5-minute video that appears to be the source of the photos that the other news organization received. The timestamp on the video is actually incorrect, most likely because the device's settings that were recording were not synced to the network. So it says it's from 2017. Obviously, it's not. And the inmate said that the video was taken before Assange was transferred to the hospital ward, which was sometime around May 17th. So that video is already, several weeks old. In the video, it's kind of hard to hear what they're talking about, but Assange seems aware, and he's walking around, and mostly he's just listening to another prisoner who's speaking to him. But we can tell, like, especially around, he's wearing thick clothing, but it looks like from around his neck, you can tell that he's lost weight. And then on June 11th, just yesterday, the artist Ai Weiwei actually went to visit him in Belmarsh with Assange's father, John Shipton. And Ai Weiwei said he's much skinnier than before. He's lost 20 pounds at least, and he is under psychological pressure. Ai Weiwei had last met with Assange at the Ecuadorian embassy in September 2015. There's a really funny selfie that they took together where they're giving the middle finger to the camera. And Ai Weiwei also said, of course, he doesn't know what's going to happen next, but he was very happy to see his father and me. I think the whole segment was 15 minutes long or so. So if you want to watch that, I have it linked in the blog post I'm building about this case. And he also confirmed that Assange was still being kept in the medical ward. So basically, he's been in the medical ward since mid-May. That's almost a whole month now. And then I haven't linked to anything about the US finally sending the extradition warrant to the UK, because honestly, all of the articles, primarily the Washington Post, that were talking about that, I don't consider it to be trustworthy. And also, like, it's so hard to find updates about this case from news outlets that consistently get basic details about the case wrong. Like, they're still saying charges in Sweden, blah, blah, blah. There are no charges in Sweden, as I have to keep saying. And so, but according to the Washington Post, they think that the extradition request was formally sent on June 6th, last Thursday, which means that at this point, no further charges should be filed against him. There was some speculation that the Justice Department would bring more charges after there were reports that they questioned a convicted child molester from Iceland who was exposed several years ago as being a paid informant of the FBI. And the Justice Department may still use him as a witness if Assange is taken to the United States, but because most of the other witnesses that they have tried to get involved have more courage in their pinky fingers than this pedophile snitch has in his entire body, the Department of Justice's case is light on people who are willing to compromise on their principles to help them out. And so their extradition request will probably not be acceptable under British law, because espionage is considered a political offense, and Britain, if it follows its own laws, is not supposed to extradite for political offenses. So today, there is actually an event going on in London called Imperialism on Trial, and I wanted to read a portion of the speech that was made by Chris Hedges yesterday, because it's a 2-day event, and he said the following. I'm not reading the whole thing, I'm just reading a selection. But he said, "There's nothing like the boot of the oppressor on your neck to give you moral clarity. None of these war crimes and hundreds more reported to the US military but never investigated would have been made public without Julian, Chelsea Manning, and WikiLeaks. That is the role of journalists, to give a voice to those who without us would have no voice, to hold the powerful to account, and to give the forgotten and the demonized justice, to speak the truth. We have watched over the last decade as freedom of the press and legal protection for those who exposed government abuses and lies have been obliterated by wholesale government surveillance and the criminalizing of the leaking, and in Julian's persecution, publication of these secrets. The press has been largely emasculated in the United States, and the repeated use of the Espionage Act, especially under the Obama administration, to charge and sentence whistleblowers has shut down our ability to shine light into the inner workings of power and empire. Governmental officials with a conscience, knowing all of their communications are monitored, captured, and stored by intelligence agencies with a can't read this because I'm looking sideways. Captured and stored by intelligence agencies are too frightened to reach out to reporters. The last line of defense lies with those with the skills that allow them to burrow into the records of the security and surveillance state, and with the courage to make them public, such as Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning, and Jeremy Hammond, who is now serving a 10-year prison sentence in the United States for hacking into the Texas-based private security firm Strategic Forecasting Inc., otherwise known as Stratfor. The price of resistance is high, not only for them, but for those such as Julian willing to publish this information. As Sarah Harrison pointed out, this is our data, our information, our history. We must fight to own it. Even if Julian were odious, which he is not, even if he carried out a sexual offense, which he did not, and even if he was a poor house guest, which he was not, it would make no difference. Julian is not being persecuted for his vices. He is being persecuted for his virtues." End quote. And tangentially, Stefania, the investigative journalist who I've quoted from a number of times, she tweeted 2 days ago that the UK FOIA tribunal that she's been trying to move along for a number of years now has finally, after 18 months of doing nothing, they've scheduled an upper tribunal public hearing on July 1st regarding documents and email communications about Assange's case that have not been revealed yet. And so it was because of, previously it was because of her FOIA request that we learned about how the UK, specifically the Crown Prosecution Service, was exerting influence on the case in Sweden to deliberately delay the process since 2011. And obviously, all of this will have legal costs. So please continue to donate to the legal fund for Assange that is organized by the Courage Foundation. They accept Bitcoin as usual. And of course, I have I don't know if that's going to work. Oh, no, camera's covered. Here we go. I don't know if you can see all that. You should.
Yep, we got it.
It's a much bigger poster, but I don't want to accidentally risk showing myself on camera. So that's all I can show for now.
All right. Yeah. I mean, you know, I like you're saying. I mean, you see him, he's like, imagine he's stressed out about what's going on, and it's got to be a crazy situation over there. I mean, just hope it kind of evolves into a positive direction. I don't like, while you were talking, I'm always like sort of researching what's going on about this, like as you're talking, and for some reason this tweet popped up to where I'm looking at some story from USA Today talking about a Russian investigative journalist who's being freed of all charges. All his charges are being dropped, and he's being let go. And it's just so crazy what world we live in right now, where it's like we're supposed to stand, you know, for these liberties that actually give us this information and these freedoms, and you know, this whole narrative about, oh well, Russia this and Russia that, and if you look at just the realities of what's going on, and you look at Assange and the way he's being treated just for passing down information, and yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, watch out, don't get yourself doxxed there.
Alrighty then. I guess that wraps us up, brings us to the end of the season. So, final thought time.
Well, an early thought. It looks like the guys missed Janine's photo. I don't know why. Like they're having trouble seeing it on the YouTube end. Damn.
Oh, well. I have a poster. It says Free Assange.
All right. Come on. Final thoughts now. Cough them up.
Final thoughts, go to your meetups and be prepared for the FATF guidelines coming out. They might drop while we're over the hiatus.
Yeah, my final thought is that there is going to be a conference in Berlin, and it's going to be great, and there is going to be a great speaker called Susanne Tempelhof. So come on, guys, and watch her in action.
Challenge her. Challenge her.
Yeah, ask that question. Just go back and re-listen to it. Another thing I wanted to bring up.
You are.
What's that?
Nothing, just a social justice warrior joke.
Oh yeah, those are everywhere. There's some more jokes coming out of the whole BSV camp. Did you guys see that Jimmy and Craig showed up at Oxford and they published a video on YouTube about his I feel so sorry for that audience. Did you guys just catch that?
Nope.
Oh my.
Here's something I did catch, though. Just one quick second while I look this up so I can get this imbecile's name again. Okay. Mike Relentless on Twitter posted this gem. So Pomp tweeted, "What's the hardest problem that you would try to solve if you could work on any problem in the world?" Mike Relentless, a retarded Bcasher, said, "Free energy. I actually think I can build a device that generates electricity with no moving parts or solar panels. Working on experiments now." Guys, I mean, come on. When is everybody going to wake up and realize that the true Bitcoin SV, is just going to solve all the world's problems? Shit, a Bcasher already just invented perpetual motion, guys. Like, come on, get with it.
First, they think you're crazy. Then they fight you. Then all of a sudden, you change the word.
God, yeah, but it's legitimately a nut house over there at this point. It really is.
First they think you're crazy, then you bring a wheelbarrow of degrees, and then you actually do go crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard from Calvin Iyer in a while. Maybe we'll get a good glimpse out of him or something over the hiatus.
Alrighty, well, I guess that's it. That's a wrap. We are now entering our 2-week hiatus, and I guess we will see you all on June 26th. So until then, adios, everybody.
Later, everyone.
Auf Wiedersehen.